When I was playing Gibbon Beyond the Trees, it's one of a few games that I've played that evoked something that I call as a flow state. Traditionally you get this in music or in creativity. I get this sometimes in games as well, and it's usually with rhythm games or with sim racing games. And it's where I'm totally connected to the gameplay experience in front of me, that the world around me just blurs into non-existence, and I'm at one with whatever it is that's going on in front of me from a gameplay perspective. Now, that might sound like super over the top and really highfalutin and just like, what? And pretentious, but some games really do that for me, and Gibbon Beyond the Trees was one of those. It's a very simple game to pick up. You're playing as this Gibbon who is essentially part of a 2D, I'm going to say endless runner, but it's not really. Your character always moves forward. But what you're doing is called brachiation, which is the art from swinging from branch to branch. You control the movements of your Gibbon with the bumper controls on your controller. So you have the ability to either swing from branch to branch and hang underneath things, and you do that by pressing and holding down the right trigger, or you can run and slide and jump along things or bounce along them when you get to the high density areas with umbrellas and tents and stuff by holding down the left trigger. And what you're doing is waiting until you hit the edge or the end of a ledge of something, or the end of a tree trunk or tree branch or something like that. It could be electricity wires, whatever it is that you're traversing and essentially ape parkouring across. You then let go of your bumper button, and that will propel your Gibbon forward in a cute, nice, beautiful angle with some verticality and oomph to it. And that's where the flow state comes in, because you're pressing and holding as you watch your Gibbon striding out beautifully and boldly and strongly and confidently across this beautifully coloured world that seems so full of life and vibrant and colourful and dense. And then every time you just hit an edge, you just let go and it just flings off, and it's so rewarding, and just intrinsically it just works, both visually from a gameplay perspective and from a feeling and a rhythmic pattern. The way how the parkour works, it's almost as if the Gibbon knows to like short arm itself so that it lines up beautifully with the end of a branch. So you don't ever kind of get into patterns where you're not sure if something's going to work or not. It just happens. Adding into all of this, you can then start to perform tricks. So you can do acrobatic jumps, you can do somersaults. And what's quite beautiful is that throughout the game you actually have a Gibbon friend along for the ride, and you can interact with that other Gibbon, and like they'll hang from the trees and their arms will come down and you'll grab it and like throw the other one off. And again, it just all feels effortless and flowing and free and liberating to some degree because of just the way how it all pulls together. The game is split into two very distinct modes. The first one is a structured story mode that sees you swing through a jungle, eventually coming up to where human behaviour and Mother Nature collide. And this story is around the fact that human nature and Mother Nature are colliding, so that as poaching and destruction of ecosystems and habitats become just more and more commonplace and we aren't protecting our forest environments, the gibbons are becoming more and more endangered, and this shows the plight of a family of gibbons trying to survive all of that and eventually trying to live in a much more clustered town. But it goes through lots of environmental change, which then changes what's available for you to swing on. And it's a really interesting way of telling a story, and you can be passive in just continuing to swing on by and just letting it all happen around you and to you. Or you can slow down and actually take the low road and tread along the paths and peer into what's going on around you. Now, there's lots and lots of human characters around and lots of things that you can do that are kind of hidden behind the scenes. So you can just swing by most of this and miss half the story if you're having fun in the trees. And that is totally a valid experience. But if you play it again through, this is a game that, whilst the actual story itself just takes over an hour or so to play, you have lots of replayability because you can take different routes through because of just how freeform brachiation can be. So, want to go down the road and start mucking about and causing problems for the people down below? You can do. Want to have a Jungle Book experience up on high? Go for that too. Swing between the lot, do a lot of sliding, bouncing around on umbrellas, sliding down rooftops, hanging off of electric lines. It's all up to you wherever you go. And it's just that freedom to just enjoy the flow state of swinging around and being a parkour Gibbon is totally up for you. And so it does lend itself to replayability. There's then a second mode called Liberation Mode, which gives you procedurally generated jungle environments, borrowing from bits of what's been prepared in the story mode. And what that asks you to do is to find different birds in cages to then free them as you move through the world. And so that kind of gives you like a proper structured goal. However, this was the one point where I ran into a bug, and this was if I fell down a hole or into like a motorway road or into a place where I was quote unquote dead and needed to respawn. In the Liberation mode, the game kept crashing to my desktop, whereas in story mode it was totally fine. This game was recently released as a stealth release on Steam as part of an indie promotion this week. It comes to PC on the 18th of May. This is an absolutely gorgeous and fantastic experience. The story will tug at your heartstrings, but is not full of like doom and gloom. There is hope and optimism there too, which I think is a really important message to have. It also gives you more links for climate change. It looks visually beautiful. I really like the style of like pastel South American vibe of what's going on here. Also, a massive shout out to the soundtrack made by Scientific. I'm a absolute sucker for anything that's tuned with percussion, just in my general listening habit. So hang drums, mbeiras, thumb pianos, all of that kind of stuff. And kalimbas is another one that pops to mind. And all of that makes up the soundtrack here. So I will be going out and purposely trying to buy the soundtrack separately because there's loads of earworms and it's very percussive and it just beautifully transitions as you go from a jungle environment to something more somber when you've gone through, say, some destructed rainforest. And then the hustle and bustle of the crowd environments reminds me a little bit, and I'm stretching this perhaps, of Koyaanisqatsi from Philip Glass when you start to, or more about Powakatsi, I guess, where it starts to explore time lapses around the human world and cities and all of that kind of stuff. It gave me those kind of vibes. So I appreciate they're probably very niche references, but hey, they're some of my favourite films. So yeah, adore this. Totally recommended. Yes, it's a short experience, but there's tons of replayability here, and it gets 2 hearty thumbs up from me. This is a kind of game that just flies out left field that really surprises you, and I'm so delighted that it's made, and I hope it brings awareness to the plight of the Gibbons. Written review will be over on higherplayinggames.com this weekend. Any comments or questions, leave them down below. Love it. Bye-bye. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.